So we'll start with unsupervised, and in unsupervised, we are already very much clear about the clustering. We've also discussed about clustering, not just the usual hierarchical and non-hierarchical, but also the other 2-3 varieties of clustering we've discussed at great length, considerable length, I would say, on those things. So the next thing that we are going to discuss is something many data scientists do not pay importance, and good amount of people are not even aware that such a thing exists. All right. They assume that improving the model is only for supervised learning. Unsupervised learning is you build one model, done. My job is done. What did you do? I did k-means clustering. Okay, then what next? That's it. After that, I moved. How did you improve? No, why to improve k-means clustering? I've actually had people respond back. In unsupervised, there is no requirement for, they were very confident that in unsupervised, there is no necessity for improving the model. And that it is that aspect that we are going to be discussing today. All right. So I'll keep it very generic, the first question. So to you, Sharath, how do you measure the quality of a model with reference to clustering? And once you have measured it, how do you go to the next level? Could you please, brighten our day with your information on that?
Thank you, Nitin. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, all the participants joined with us. And good evening, everyone who's going to view it at a later point of time. Welcome to the channel. And let me jump into the question. The question is, how do we decide on the best clustering approach? The standard algorithms are anyways there, right? We've discussed about that. Hierarchical clustering, non-hierarchical clustering, then we have density-based clustering, right? So various other techniques are available. Each of this clustering technique has a specific objective. And that objective is to try and ensure that we get more and more homogeneous records being grouped together. Now, the idea is to ensure that the variation between the data points is minimized. If the variation is minimized, that means the characteristics with respect to those records will be similar. And when we talk about the characteristics being similar, that means the information is something that we will be able to extract. So clustering basically allows us to get this patterns understood from the data. Now, there are clustering evaluation techniques that we can use, and each of these evaluation techniques, of course, has their own methodology, the formulas, the background. Ultimately, all these things, all these techniques are trying to identify how good or how homogeneous are your clusters formed on your database, whatever the database that we are working on. There are certain techniques which we can obviously use. So for example, Silhouette coefficient. Then we have inertia score, which is very, very popular, which is used for, by default, the technique used for k-means clustering. Then we have pseudo f-test that can be used. We have Dunn index, Rand index, so on and so forth. So these are various techniques which allow us to evaluate the clusters by doing quantification of the clusters. Nitin.
Sorry, I was thinking I had unmuted, my bad. So thank you, Sharath. Thank you for that detailed answer there. So anything you would like to add, Bharani, on that with reference to any experiences you've had with reference to which metric you would prefer when you want to evaluate a cluster's quality?
Absolutely, Nitin. So a few of the metrics which can be used to evaluate clustering are classified as external and internal. External techniques are external validation metrics which are used to evaluate clustering success, whether clustering is good or bad. requires us to have the true labels, ground truth. Meaning, say you have done clustering and there is a new customer and you supplied it to your clustering algorithm, and your clustering algorithm puts that specific individual customer into, say, a cluster called as early adopters, people who adopt technology faster. So you put that person there. But does that individual truly belong to that cluster? If you can get that information, then, I mean, of course, it is difficult. It is not straightforward. You probably have to interview that person, right? Understand more details. And then you would probably figure out that, yes, this person will belong to early adopters cluster. If you know that ground label or ground truth using some mechanism experiments or using some kind of interviews, focused interviews, etc., then we have measures such as homogeneity, completeness, and you have something else which is called as V measure. These are the three metrics when it comes to evaluating cluster, provided you have the ground truth available. And all of these measures range between 0 to 1. Higher the values, better is accuracy, like 0% to 100%. And also, we have internal validation techniques, internal evaluation metrics, like silhouette coefficient is there. Then you have CH index, which our friend Sharath has spoken about. In that way, there are a lot of metrics which does not require you to have the ground truth values. Even without the ground truth, you can proceed further with the analysis or with the evaluation of the cluster. Not just this, there are also a lot of other criteria which one has to give importance to before deciding whether clustering solution is good or bad. There is something called as stability. With slight change in your algorithm hyperparameters, would one record will one record move into another cluster, or would it remain in the same cluster? Is it reliable or not? Okay, do you have clusters which are sufficiently large enough to say that, yes, this is a cluster? Okay, and reliable means only if there is stability, only if you know that, with certain changes in the hyperparameters, there is no significant change of records which belong to different clusters. Only then can you rely on that. Only then can you devise a marketing strategy around that. Okay, and it should be actionable. Whatever clusters you're forming, you should be in a position to take action upon that. You probably want to devise a marketing strategy for each of the segments or each of the clusters. Okay, and also the clusters should be relevant to the client's objectives. These are a few things which have to be given importance from business standpoint as well, before we decide whether the cluster is good or bad. But at the end of the day, are you able to give logical names to the clusters or not? That would determine the success. And yep, thank you, Nitin. Yeah.